Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at a Necrotic Wake 20 that we two-chested, where I did 11.6k overall DPS. So before we get into the video, I've got a couple things to say. First, I do plan on making a quote-unquote cheat sheet for what talents you should run in every dungeon, and beyond that, like what soulbinds I think are good, and stuff like that. So keep an eye out for that in the coming days. I will post a video where I kind of go in depth and explain why I chose what I chose. Because that question, what talent should I run in every dungeon, does not have a super straightforward answer. So I can't just say, oh, you're doing Theater of Pain, play Misery, Death and Madness, Auspicious Spirits, Hungering Void, right? I could say that, but the problem is that that's not actually the best choice in a lot of scenarios, although it is kind of the go-to for most people. It's just such a nuanced question. It depends on your team comp, it depends on the affixes for the week, it depends on the key level, it depends on if you're in a coordinated group or not. All of that stuff factors in. So I plan on, like I said, I plan on making a cheat sheet. It'll be a spreadsheet most likely, where I go through all of those options and say what I would play in all of those options in each dungeon, kind of thing, right? So, excuse me, sorry. So like I said, keep an eye out for that. There will be a video to go along with it where I explain stuff. Okay, so that was my first like announcement thing. And now we'll just talk about stuff going into this key. So this is my talent setup that I ran. A lot of people will say that you should play Karain if you're going to play Ancient Madness and do a high fortified key like this, but I disagree. I feel like Dreamweaver is just so strong right now. Field of Blossoms is really nice, and if you can stand in it, it's a really nice benefit, right? But that's not why I'm playing Dreamweaver. Dreamweaver, I think the capstone soulbind trait, or whatever it's called, where you get an increased 1% DPS stacking up to 3 times on anything you hit, is just huge. So you can get an extra 3% DPS or 3% damage on anything you're hitting as long as you're constantly hitting it, which means that instead of having like Karain loses a lot of value if you can't extend the first strike buff. So if you hit everything and so you get your first strike proc once and then you don't get it ever again on that pack, it's a lot weaker than if you can hit one thing and then when the first strike buff is about to fall off, you hit something else, so you get it for longer. Whereas Dreamweaver, you get the buff forever while you're fighting the pack. So I prefer Dreamweaver. I really like Field of Blossoms, and like I said, I feel like the capstone trait of Dreamweaver is really, really strong. So these are what I'm running: Ancient Madness, Shadow Crash, Searing Nightmare, because I'm in a coordinated group. All of us are in Discord with each other. This guy is a pug, but the rest of us are friends for a while. So, sorry, excuse me again. Yeah, so we're in a coordinated group, so we're gonna go really big. We're gonna pull like super crazy, and we're gonna do some fun shenanigans. So hopefully you guys enjoy. And because of that, because we're doing this really big, crazy amount of pulls and things, I am gonna play my AOE talents. If we were gonna pull a lot smaller, maybe I would play less AOE focused. But like this pull right here is a good example. We pull 4 packs on top of each other and just blast everything. So I'm gonna hit my Soul-Lighting Ruby. I get Drain Fluids on right there. But yeah, I'm just gonna pop all my cooldowns here at the beginning. Power Infusion, Void Form, Shadow Crash, and then as stuff starts to die, I'm gonna start trying to snipe stuff with Shadow Word Death to get Shadow Flame Rifts off and to get Insanity Generation. And yeah, I mean that's the end of the first pull. Everything just kind of died because all 3 of the DPS were doing 30k DPS, and the tank was even doing 20k, and even the healer is doing 9k DPS right there. So, I mean, on really, really big pulls like that, you can kind of just absolutely blast. I will mention, you'll notice on that first pull, I didn't put Vampiric Touch on pretty much anything. It's just a waste of time. Vampiric Touch is good when stuff is going to live a long time, and when there's not a lot of stuff, because then you can be casting other abilities that generate shadowy apparitions, like your Devouring Plagues, your Void Bolts, and your Mind Blasts. But when you have 20 mobs all on top of each other, you do more damage if you just spam Searing Nightmare and Shadow Crash and Mind Seer and the occasional Shadow Flame Rift, so like one Mind Blast every so often. And as stuff starts to die, you should start swapping from straight up AoE rotation where you're just spamming Shadow Crash and Searing Nightmare. As stuff starts to die, you should start swapping into your Mind Blasts and your Shadow Word Deaths so that you can get some Shadow Flame Rifts going. Because as the target count goes from 20 down to like 10, down to like 7, the value that you get from Searing Nightmare starts really high at really high targets and goes down as you lose targets. And the value you get from Shadow Flame Rifts from your Mindbender and your Shadow Flame Prism Legendary goes up. So when you're at really high target counts, it's not as good. And when you start to get to lower target counts, it gets better, right? So 5 is like the optimal target count for your Mindbender. So I pop mine right here. I cast a couple Searing Nightmares there because you do want to fit those in when you don't have any Shadow Flame Rifts that you can use. And then I'm trying to get as many Mindbender procs as I can. Like right here, I managed to extend it 3 more times because I go into Void form and I get 2 Mind Blasts and a Shadow Word Death before my Mindbender falls off. Now that it's fallen off, I'm going to worry less about casting Mind Blasts and Shadow Word Deaths. I'm going to worry more about casting Searing Nightmares. But because there's only 4 targets and stuff is about to die, now I can start looking at swapping to my single target rotation. I throw out a Shadow Crash right there to keep it on cooldown. And then, yeah, I'm going to be Shadow Word Deathing this stuff and mostly doing single targets. So both of these targets should have Vampiric Touch on them and Shadow Word Pain. And then I should be putting Devouring Plague on the one that's higher and then just trying to focus that one down. Now that we're down to 1 target, that's all I'm going to be doing. I'm just going to be hitting this one guy with my single target rotation, right? Which should be pretty obvious. So back before this, over in this edge way back there, there's a spear. You'll see our rogue has it on him right now. That's because with this, we're going to do kind of a crazy thing. Our healer had to start this guy, so we actually lose some of these orbs because we planned on starting this guy a little bit later, but our healer already had the Kyrian dude out, so he had to start this. We let these orbs sit here for a while, but they will time out eventually. And then if you watch this rogue, the rogue is going to pull the boss. The boss is going to run over. The rogue is going to vanish, and it resets the boss, which means that we don't have to worry about the boss, and we can run in and grab all this trash and pull it on top of each other. So the boss is going to respawn in, maybe 20 seconds or something. I should be standing closer than this, by the way, because I have the orb on me. And you want to be standing in melee with the orb if you can, which you can pretty much always. So I should be standing in melee. I don't have Fade to get rid of threat on these 2 dudes, so now I do run into melee because I'm scared of these guys hitting me. And then, yeah, we're just in our big time AoE rotation. I could be popping my Soul Letting Ruby, and I click on this dude and I use it on him because he's super low. And then we pull the boss, and watch right here, I'm doing 55k DPS. If you watch this DPS meter, you'll see why we did this. So we've got a ton of trash right here. Most of it is dying, and we just pulled the boss. This is looking pretty dangerous, right? Well, actually, it's not dangerous at all because the rogue throws the spear. It does 550k DPS. Just one-shots everything. And now the boss has 86% HP. So, that happened. And because the rogue didn't have any way to get rid of threat, the boss just turns and one-shots him. What should have happened, and we talked about this a little bit while we're actually doing the key, what the rogue should have done is, he said that Tricks wasn't up yet. Tricks of the Trade, for anyone who doesn't know, rogues have an ability where they can cast it on one of their allies, and all of the threat that they generate is instead sent to their ally. So what you would do is, on that pull where the rogue is going to throw the spear and do 1 billion damage or whatever, you would have him cast Tricks on the tank, so that when he throws it, the tank gets all the threat instead of the rogue, and then the boss doesn't turn and one-shot him, right? But going into that moment right there, the rogue's Tricks of the Trade was still on cooldown. It had a couple seconds left or something. So what he should have done probably, and I don't mean to just criticize because I think what he did was fine and it worked out, right? And I think he's a good player. It's just that we could have waited, 2 or 3 seconds before throwing the spear for Tricks of the Trade to come up, and then he could have cast it on the tank. We run through the silence right here because we want to bring the boss back up to this platform. So yeah, he could have cast Tricks on the tank, and then he wouldn't have been one shot right there. But we managed. I mean, we had a B-res ready for it anyway, so it wasn't like the worst scenario because we got him back up pretty much immediately. And the spear does so much damage that he's still doing 30k DPS, right? The majority of this is from the spear, but I mean, it does so much damage that it's worth him dying, even though that is avoidable. He doesn't have to die there, right? And that's just one of those things where this was the first time I did this key with these people. These guys, the rogue, the DH, and the tank have been pushing keys together pretty frequently recently, so maybe they've got more experience doing this. But this was the first time I had done a 20 this season, and with this group. So I personally would not have known, that I should be casting Tricks on the tank. And so maybe that's just a familiarity thing where maybe they haven't done this route specifically enough times for to have all those little intricacies worked out, where the rogue would know, okay, hold on, we got to wait 2 seconds, 3 seconds for this thing to go off so that I can Tricks you, and then we can do it, right? Again, right here, we lose most of these orbs because the healer hits it, but the healer, we were all in Discord, but the healer was muted, just listening. So these 3 orbs all just disappear, and we don't get them because the tank and the 2 melee didn't realize that the healer had clicked the Goliath dude. So I managed to get one because I was standing right next to it. The healer got one because he was the one who did it. But the rest of us, I should have said something. I should have been like, guys, you got to grab orbs. They're going to disappear. But I didn't, right? So this is a communication error on my part. And even the healer did type in chat and say, he said orgs, and he meant to say orbs, but it was a little too late and we didn't get them. So that is one thing we could have done better. I should have said something. That's something I've been trying to improve is I feel like I'm very good at keeping an eye on my own play and making sure I'm doing everything correctly, but I'm wary of telling other people to do stuff because I don't want to sound like I'm trying to tell them how to play the game, right? I'm just trying to help and make the key go smoother and everything. And so there is a time where you should be saying, hey, you do this, if people aren't remembering, or if there's like some situation where you have to kind of improv, something happens that you didn't have planned, and you can maybe work it out if you call some stuff, right? That's one thing I've been trying to work on, because this is a great example. When those orbs despawned, I saw them on the ground. I could have just said, guys, the healer clicked the thing, you need to grab the orbs, and then we could have had all 5 orbs and it wouldn't have been a big deal at all. But instead I just said nothing and they disappeared, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind. Especially, it's really hard if you're in a pug and you're not in like a voice chat together, because you have to type that out, and all the time you spend typing, unless you're like 500 words per minute Mozart of the keyboard typist, you're gonna lose globals for all the time you spend typing stuff out. So yeah, I mean, if you're in a pug, you can try to be like, yo, orbs or whatever in chat, but that's just one thing that I think is underrated. If you can communicate effectively, it just brings up everybody's play, right? So right here we do something a little strange. Sorry. We do something a little strange. So we shackle this mage. For anyone who doesn't know, these are undead, and you can shackle undead as a shadow priest. So all the mages in the dungeon you can shackle, and you should be shackling. It's not worth trying to kill them because they cast their frostbolt volley, which means you need a bunch of extra kicks, and they don't have to die, because as soon as you kill the guy who summons them, they die, right? So every single mage in the dungeon, there's 2 mages at the end of this little gauntlet area, and if you only have 1 priest, you can't shackle both. But we have 2 priests, so at the end of it, we can shackle both. And it's a good thing to keep in mind for the boss, because the boss will summon those mages as well. You really have 2 options when it comes to those mages. You can either grip them in and have the DPS focus them down, everybody just kills them real quick, or you can have your priests shackle them, and you don't have to worry about doing any damage to them. You can focus your damage on the other adds and focus your damage on the boss. And in that scenario, when the what's it called, Army of the Dead or whatever ability the boss casts that summons those, when that thing goes off, they're not going to do anything. Anything that's CC'd won't explode and kill everybody. So a monk can paralyze it, a rogue can blind it, a priest can shackle it. There's all sorts of things you can do to not have to deal with those guys. And it's beneficial, right? Because any damage that you spend on those guys is damage you can't spend on the boss or on the other trash that is less dangerous, right? So shackle those mages. Up here you'll see again. Oh, actually, we potion through this. But you see there's 2 mages. There's a mage right here and a mage right here. If you're going to pull this necromancer guy, you should shackle both of those mages. Shackling this far mage is kind of hard without pulling that group. So maybe pull the group, make sure nobody hits it, and then shackle it while you're in the middle of combat, and then go back to your regularly scheduled AoE rotation, right? So the other thing I'll mention is shackle will break with damage. So if you're gonna shackle stuff, you need to be careful that people aren't AoEing, right? Because I mean they can AoE, but they need to make sure they're not hitting your shackled guy, because just like most other CC, if it gets hit, it's gonna break. And when those mages break, it's really bad if you don't recognize it, because their frostbolt volley, especially on a higher key like this, will do a lot of damage. So right here again, we use a spear. So we finish off that dude and we hit this boss. Oh, it's called Land of the Dead, not Army of the Dead. I shackle this mage right here. There's a mage out here that gets knocked back, and then the healer shackles it. So we've got both mages shackled, which means that they're not going to explode when everything dies, or when the cast finishes. And because this orb is up, I'm going to click it mid pull right here while I'm trying to do damage. Necrotic Breath comes out, but I'm pretty safe, so I'm not too worried about it. And I do finally get this orb. Jeez, that took forever. And I'm going to take Champion's Brand. I take 2 Champion's Brands, the Volcanic Plumage, and the Stone Ward is what it's called. Those are the ones I take in any high fortified key, really. And then, yeah, I mean, there's not too much to say about this boss fight other than shackle the mages. I shackle, when we were doing this key and we were all in Discord, I said to the priest, I said, I'm going to shackle Skull. We have an auto marker that's marking the mages with a skull. I said, I'm going to shackle Skull, which is the first mage that spawns. The boss always spawns these adds in an order, so it'll always be a warrior, and then a mage, and then something else, so a crossbowman in this case, and then another mage. So the mages are always the second and fourth things to be spawned. So I tell the priest, I'm going to shackle the first one, you shackle the second one, and I know that the very first thing to come out won't be a mage, but the second thing will always be a mage, and that's the guy I'm going to shackle. So I look for the things on the ground, I see the first green circle, I'm like, okay, that's not my guy. I see the second green circle, and I automatically know that's the mage, I'm going to need to shackle it as soon as it spawns. It spawns, I shackle it, bada bing, bada boom. So we finish this boss fight, and then right here, we're going to mostly just wait for the angels to come down. The tank goes over and grabs the orb from that Goliath dude, the like orb of power or whatever. And then we're all going to take an angel and go to the top. And in here, you can make it's a pretty good time if you do some really big, crazy pulls again, like we've been doing. So, of course, we're going to keep doing that. And I'll try to explain these as we go about them. So we mass route all these soldiers over here, this patrol, so that it stays close. We're going to kill these spare parts first. You could pull these spare parts on top of all this, but they're pretty dangerous. They hit pretty hard. Like, our tank didn't want to pull all these on top of that, especially because it's raging. And with raging, as stuff starts to die, right, it does a ton of damage. So you have to be pretty careful. And with explosive, you'll see there's a ton of explosives coming out here. So you need to be very aware if you're planning on doing really big pulls like this. Somebody is going to have to keep an eye on those explosives. And really what it should be is everybody should be keeping an eye on those. So like I was saying before, rogues and demon hunters are really good at killing those explosives. They can just tab, smack it, tab back, right? They can even just auto attack them because they are, since they fixed, I don't know if it's a fix, since they nerfed explosives to the point where anything one-shots them, which is how they wanted it originally, auto attacks from those guys will kill them. So they don't even have to spend any resources or worry about anything like that. They can just auto attack them and it's fine. So we got a corpse collector in this group. We're just doing a 3-pack right here, mostly for the sake of our tank. His cooldowns, he doesn't have his defensive cooldowns. He's got bark skin, but he doesn't have incarn, so he's not ready to do a really big pull again yet. So we're going to just pull this 3-pack. I've got my CDs coming up. Oh, well, I guess I only have void form right now because I just used my mindbender. But I'm ready for a big pull as soon as he's ready. It's just that if the tank dies, the big pull is not worth it, right? So we are going to wait for the tank to have his stuff ready before we go into this next big pull. Okay, so now that the soldiers are dead, we're going to go into this pack at the back with the stitch work. Again, this is not a huge pull, it's just a 4-pack. We do need to keep an eye on that star mob back there who casts gore splatter. I'm pretty sure one of them goes off. Just because all of the kicks were down. Mine comes up in like 2 seconds, so I think mine was up when this gore splatter goes off. It's right here. So me and the tank could both have kicked that, but neither of us did. I wasn't paying enough attention. I was focusing on DPS, right? But I wasn't paying enough attention. I could have kicked that easily. That's my bad. I should have kicked it. But also the tank could have kicked it. But he's got to worry about staying alive. So maybe he had other things going on. I could have kicked it. It goes off. We managed to live anyway. So it's not a huge deal. But obviously, if you cannot take damage, that's better than taking damage. So right here, what we're going to do, we have a flesh crafter. The flesh crafter throws cleavers. So we're going to try not to kill it very quickly. We want it to throw cleavers into this other dude. You can see it just chunked it for like 30% of its HP. And then what we're also going to do is not kill this flesh cleaver flesh crafter even after this dude dies. Because the throw cleavers that this guy does can hit this Oros Coldheart guy. And it'll do damage to him the same way it does damage to that other dude. So we're going to keep it alive. We're going to pull the cold heart guy. I get biting cold on me, so I got to be careful. I'm popping Fade just to keep myself alive a little bit. Frostlance comes out. I Night Fate Blink out of the way, and then I come back to my circle. And then this is exactly what I was talking about. This Throw Cleaver goes, it hits the guy, does 20% of his HP. Makes this guy a lot less worrisome. Not very hard to deal with. This guy, we could have done him without the Flesh Crafter for sure. Our healer was pretty strong, and our DPS are pretty strong, and our tank is really strong, so we were totally fine just doing that guy without a Flesh Crafter. But it is faster to do it with the Flesh Crafter. So right here I take the regenerative fungus. Yeah, so it's faster to do it with the Flesh Crafter, just because these cleavers, right, do so much damage. So these guys cast Drain Fluid, which you got to be careful about. Drain Fluids. This Morbid Fixation is really pretty scary too. Our Demon Hunter stays in. I'm not sure how he's managing this, but he stays in for a bit right there. Usually if you have a Paladin can cast Blessing of Protection on whoever's targeted by that Morbid Fixation. I'm not sure what hit me right there. Maybe a cleaver? But yeah, so a paladin can cast Blessing of Protection on whoever's targeted by the Morbid Fixation, and they can just stay in, because this is physical damage when this guy gets to you. We hit him with a cleaver as he's chasing the priest, and now we're just going to finish off this other guy. We don't have a paladin in our group, right? So we don't have that option. But I'm not sure exactly what Meta did there to stay alive. Maybe I could ask him. Maybe darkness and blur or something, but he managed to stay in for an extra second or so, which just meant that we all got more uptime on that mob before it had to run away. And then right here, this is a good example of a pack size where you want to be doing both things. So Shadow Priests kind of have two different ways to do AoE damage. The first way is Shadow Crash and Searing Nightmare spam, and the second way is Shadow Flame Rift damage. So popping Mindbender and then hitting your Mind Blasts and your Shadow Word Deaths. And this is a scenario where there's 4 targets, so you want to get a lot of Shadow Flame Rift damage because it's best at 4 and 5 targets. It's best at 5, so it's really good here. But also, you want to get as much Shadow Crash and Searing Nightmare damage as possible. So this is where the rotation of Shadow Priest can be really, really fun, but also pretty punishing. So if you keep an eye on how I play this pull, most of the time I'm going to be using my Mind Blasts and my Shadow Word Deaths, and then anytime those are on cooldown, I'm going to be spamming Searing Nightmare and Shadow Crash. So if we go back, I'll go back to the beginning of this pull just to show you guys real quick. This poll is going to come out, and keep an eye on how I play it. If you keep an eye over here, you'll see. So I Vampiric Touch this first guy. As stuff comes out, I pop all my CDs, Shadow Crash immediately into Void Form, a couple Searing Nightmares, a couple more Searing Nightmares, and then I go Mind Blast, Shadow Word Death to get 3 Rifts, more Searing Nightmares, another Mind Blast, more Searing Nightmares because things are on cooldown, and then I get another Mind Blast here, but it was a little too late, and I don't get my Mindbender to proc another Shadow Flame Rift. So what I could have done better there is use Mind Blast pretty quickly after getting into Void Form. I should have Void Form, Shadow Crashed, and then 1 Mind Blast, and then Searing Nightmare spam, and then another Mind Blast and a Shadow Word Death, just so that I have more Mind Blasts over the course of that. Instead of doing like 16k DPS right now, I could be doing maybe 18 to 20k or something closer to what the Demon Hunter is doing. If I had just played that a little bit better, right? Obviously, 16k for me is not bad, right? That's a pretty good amount of damage to do to a 4-pack like that. But it could have been better. Right here, this is something really interesting that I don't know if it was worth it. So I hit, this guy's about to die, right? We're going into another 4 or 5-pack. I don't remember. I think there's 4 in this upcoming pack. As this guy dies, I snipe it with my Soul-Letting Ruby. And then something that's pretty interesting, it's this green projectile right here. It's kind of hard to see. But Soul-Letting Ruby has a travel time, and you can avoid it. So what I do is, as this is coming towards me, I want to get this crit buff as close to this pack as I can so that I have it as long as possible in this pack. As it's coming towards me, I Night Fae blink to get out of the way so that it has to travel a little bit further so that I get it a little bit closer to this pack. And you'll see that right here. I'm running, I blink, and then it hits me, and I now get the buff, right? So maybe that was worth it, maybe it wasn't. It just gives me like a couple, maybe 2 extra seconds of that buff on this pack. But that's the kind of thing that you want to be looking at doing. Maybe it wasn't worth it to do it right there, but anytime you can get a little bit extra damage, right? A little bit extra uptime on a buff, a little bit extra time standing in your Field of Blossoms, everything like that, you should be trying to do that kind of thing. So whether or not that was the best decision, who knows? Hard to say. But at the very least, it's got the right idea, right? It's good to try and extend those buffs and try to get those buffs when you need them, right? Things like that. If I just popped it at the beginning of this pull, I would have got less crit from it, albeit for a longer time in the pull. So whether or not, like I said, is it better to have a lot of crit for less time or some crit for a longer time, right? That's kind of the the question right there to determine whether it was better to do what I did or to just use it at the beginning. Right here, something important to keep in mind, this guy, the surgeon, throws these pools on the ground. So if you don't have the hook on you, you need to try and bait these pools. They target players, so you want to try and bait them away from where you need to throw the hook. So if you're melee, stand somewhere in this arc, and if you're ranged, don't stand where you need to throw the hook. So if you're a Shadow Priest like me, I tend to stand over here in this area. Don't stand where the hook needs to go, because then when people need to throw the hook, they have to go stand in a puddle, and you don't want that. So that's something to keep in mind for sure. This first hook goes out. We start hitting the boss. I think we're going to use a weapon on this boss, but maybe I'm wrong. I pop my Field of Blossoms right here, my Fey Guardians, early, and then I send this hook to the platform. This was a mistake. I should have put this aiming at the surgeon because he casts this Morbid Fixation. I made a mistake here. I should have aimed it at him so that the hook could have pulled him back and he would have stopped the Morbid Fixation. And then this next hook, this is the one that should be pointing at the platform. And this one almost misses. It's a little far to the left in my opinion, but luckily it hits, so it doesn't matter. I fade. Oh, I didn't fade because it's not on cooldown, but you should fade when these guys come out so they don't target you. And then yeah, we need to blast this surgeon as fast as possible. We would like to kill him before the next before he jumps away again. I get this Morbid Fixation on me, but that's exactly how the hooks need to go, so it just stops immediately. And then yeah, it looks like we have enough damage here to finish this off. I'm Mind Searing because there are 3 targets. And when you've got 3 or more targets, Mind Sear is superior to Mind Flay. Even though Mind Flay is single target damage, Mind Sear will give you more insanity generation. Okay, so in that scenario where there's 3 targets, only the boss needs to die, it probably would have been better to cast Mind Flay, just because Mind Flay is more single target damage. Even though typically with 3 targets you want to cast Mind Sear because it's exactly as much insanity generation as Mind Flay at 3 targets. Mind Flay gives you 3 insanity per tick, and Mind Sear gives you 1 insanity for everything it hits per tick. So at 3 targets, it's giving you 3 insanity per tick. But the Mind Sear is going to do damage to all 3 things, whereas the Mind Flay will do damage to the 1 thing, but more, right? And because those 2 other dudes didn't need to die, it probably would have been the better choice in that specific scenario to cast Mind Flay instead of casting Mind Sear, right? So then, with these Comet Storms, you can stand still until 2 circles have appeared, but you need to be moving as soon as the second circle has appeared. And then what I do is I try to make a pretty tight circle around myself, and then I get hit by this Dark Exile, which is going to send me down to the bottom to kill the dude. Down here at the bottom, these swirlies you need to dodge, but the big circle that's like raining ice doesn't do anything. So at least in the past, I'm pretty sure I don't do anything with it here. It just comes, yeah, so, oh, maybe I do avoid it. But yeah, in the past, this circle just actually did no damage or anything. It was, I don't know if it was bugged or just not implemented or whatever, but it was doing no damage. I think that's still the case. I never read anywhere that they fixed that. So if that is the case, feel free to just run through it. You don't have to worry about running around it. But that gauntlet right there is a good time to use your Goblin Jump and your Soul Shape. And then right here, the other priest does something pretty nice. He grips me out right as soon as that thing happens. And that's really nice. I take no damage from this. And you may have noticed I picked up a hammer earlier. You want to save your hammers for this last boss because of the shields that this last boss casts. I should be standing in my circle here, by the way. There we go, I finally move over. The shields this guy casts, you can break them with the hammer really quickly, right? Right here at the end, things go kind of crazy. The tank ends up dying. He gets another shield on him and the tank dies. And then we're like, oh crap, this needs to end ASAP. So we're running around for this Comet Storm. I popped Vampiric Embrace to try and keep people alive. The healer pulls aggro, luckily, so I don't get one shot by this guy. Healer dies. We end up killing the boss, and it's all good in the hood. So, that's gonna be the end of the video. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you learned something. Feel free to leave a comment if you have any feedback or anything. If you want to see different things in future videos, if you would prefer that I talk about certain stuff, any kind of feedback like that, I really enjoy. I read all the comments, so I'm always seeing what people are saying. Do leave a comment if you feel like there's something you would like to say, right? But other than that, if you liked the video, make sure you click the like button. If you really liked it, feel free to subscribe. Maybe join my Discord server. Catch me on Twitch. There are links in the description below. Other than that, that's going to be the end of the video. So thanks for watching. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!